A very warm welcome and good afternoon to all our wonderful panel speakers, and in equal breath and light to all our wonderful joinees, attendees, our audience, whose presence, of course, makes this event as big a success as we had initially planned. On behalf of the management of SP Jain School of Global Management, Dubai, Mumbai, Singapore, Sydney, myself, Chandrasekhar Singh, known to all people associated with SPJ and CS. I work with the school in the Dubai campus as the Director of Corporate Relations for the Middle East region. I welcome each one of you to this wonderful discussion today, where we are going to look at the COVID-19 crisis and the impact of it, specifically to the Asia-Pacific region. But by default, cannot forget recalling what my grandmother used to tell me when I was a little kid. She would, and I'm sure most of the Indians who joined have heard this from their grandparents, that the sun rises from the east, and the east is what shows the rest of the world sunlight and the way ahead. And when it comes to by that theory ideology, the southeast region, people, let's not forget. We are talking of a major percent of the world's overall population. When it comes to Southeast Asia, we are also talking of a big majority of leading companies that are, the true global conglomerates. And therefore, it is a very, very important region. And for those people who have joined us out of their sheer interest in the topic from India and from the rest of the world, but not living yourselves in Southeast Asia, please do continue to be with us, because the one thing that the COVID crisis has completely shown us is it is not an event that happens in one country and everyone else is alienated from it. And there are so many things that we will discuss today, and I have the best panel I could have had. I mean, I just can't believe my sheer luck to be in the company of such fine men who can do such great justice to the topics. I'm sure there'll be something for each one of you, whether you're running your business or you're working for a company, and whether you deal or not directly with the Asia Pacific region, that you can draw so much out of in times to come. Without any further ado, I would like to first and foremost call upon our dear Dr. Debashish Guha, a very acclaimed professor, and he's also the director for artificial intelligence and machine learning at our school, to do a quick self-introduction. Over to you, Dr. Debashish.
Thank you, CS. As CS has already introduced me, I teach at the SP Jain School of Global Management, and I teach artificial intelligence. I will be running, for instance, a new program called Master of Artificial Intelligence in Business. That is kind of a conjunction of artificial intelligence and business management. And this is the view, the vision that we are committed to marry the various technologies, especially the technology of artificial intelligence and data science, to management practices. And as we will see, hopefully later today during this session, how that marriage, that conjunction is important to not only management and business, but to all aspects of policy making and decision making. I myself am interested mostly in research in social aspects of decision making, multi-agent artificial intelligence, uh, computational game theory, and the question of how decision analysis must be embedded in a social context and must take into account social realities, and how to computationally affect those solutions. And I hope I will be able to bring some of the excitement in this area to bear upon today's discussion. Thanks. Over to you, CS.
Thank you so much, Dr. Goa, for giving us, the brief introduction. Over to the next panel speaker of ours, Dr. Professor Abhijit Dasgupta, and he's, of course, the director for the Bachelor of Data Science program of ours that is held out of our Mumbai campus. And in very quick time, Prof. Abhijit Dasgupta has been instrumental in making that India's leading data science bachelor's program. So over to you, Prof, for a quick introduction for our viewers. Prof, you're on mute.
Yes. I run the undergraduate program on data science, and fortunately, that is also rated number one in India right now. And we are rolling out, and it has an international component in India and Sydney, and we are rolling it out to the Middle East region for now. And we started this program in 2018, and since that time, I was just back from the United States. Since that time, I've been part and parcel this program, and it has been fun working with young people, and that was something that I was missing during my last 30 years of corporate assignment. So this is a very nice change. So hopefully, I'll be able to complement what Dr. Guha says from the mathematical, statistical, and the probabilistic point of view, and see what is also happening at the ground level. Some of the information I would definitely like to collaborate with Dr. Guha. So thank you, CS, for this time, giving me this opportunity to introduce myself.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dasgupta. Over to our next panel speaker, Devanathan Raghunathan. Uh, he is currently a health tech and medtech lead at PwC based in Singapore. And Devanathan is also one of our esteemed alumni from the 2014 Executive MBA batch. Over to you, David.
Thank you, CS, for this opportunity. Uh, well, in addition to my background right now at PwC and my GMBA, in a previous life, I was a scientist. I graduated from IIT Madras and then with a PhD at the Max Planck and worked for several years in drug development and bioinformatics. Also had the privilege of spending some time at MIT. Uh, so I seek to leverage that experience from the research side in healthcare, and also having spent 5 to 7 years in startups in the healthcare ecosystem, specifically in Southeast Asia as a venture builder, as having raised money, looked at go-to-market strategies, product development. I seek to bring all that together with my present experience with the government here at A-Star as well as at PwC to make to add to this panel over here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Devan. And last not the least, over to Yogesh Rao. Yogesh currently is an associate partner for AI and analytics at IBM based in Singapore. And we are very proud to say he's also one of our GMBA esteemed alumni, 2008 graduate. So over to you, Yogesh, for a quick introduction.
Yeah, hello everybody over here. I am a graduate engineer. Like Devan said, I started out to be a nuclear scientist, ended up becoming a data scientist. And what changed, are life-changing events. But yes, all along, I have been into data. I have been playing with data all my life. And of course, there have been phases and stages of data that I've started adopting, from data management all the way to analytics, simple analytics, visual analytics. Now we are talking about advanced machine learning, very, very pervasive organizations, so on and so forth. I've worked with both classes of organizations, services, MNCs, as well as, product OEMs that offer, most of these algorithms as such. Today, yes, I'm responsible for deliver, sell, and deliver. This is the kind of role that I'm doing for IBM India, South Asia, with my colleagues and my associates. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yogesh. And on that note, let's open the forum and begin this discussion. And I would like to straight ahead dive into the first topic, the first question that we will look at, and which is, could you highlight the use of data science in vaccine and drug development? And I would like to request Devan to speak on this.
Thanks, CS. So let's start by saying that it's not just drugs or therapeutics and prophylactics like vaccine, but even diagnostics that has been touched by data science in an incredible way today because of COVID tailwinds. Never in the history of the world have vaccines, specifically new kinds of vaccines like mRNA vaccines, or even existing drugs repurposed for new indications. It's not happened in a matter of months ever. These are typically these things take years, 5 years or more. So it is because of the use of data and a concerted effort at sharing, scientific and real world data, intellectual property between countries, between companies, that this has been made feasible. Just as an example, data science has been used to understand and predict new variants, new mutations. Coronaviruses are known to mutate at a very fast rate. And uh, to be ahead of the game, scientists have employed structural and genomic models to predict what could be future mutations, their infectiousness, etc. And that would help in better developing targeted therapeutics as well. On the vaccine front, data is today being used in efforts around identifying people that are at risk of adverse reactions, as well as accelerating studies and safety and efficacy. So these are just in some ways. Of course, if we dwell deeper into it, there's many more granular ways in which data is helping for vaccine, drug development, and even diagnostics.
Lovely to hear that, Devan. I would also request Dr. Guha to share his thoughts on this.
Thank you, CS, and thank you, Devon, for that introduction. Let me right away focus on what I talked about in my introduction. Uh, AI, when it is applied to medical and clinical applications, as Devon pointed out, has two aspects. One is that of what might be called purely scientific use, the design of molecules that can be used in therapies, the design and perhaps the evaluation of the safety of vaccines, and these issues. There is another set of issues, and that is diagnostics, the conveyance of data to hospitals so that they can take better decisions, um, the policy decisions that lead to non-clinical policy efforts, non-clinical interventions in the arrest of the epidemic. The second set of problems are not just purely biological or purely narrowly scientific, they're also social. Diagnostics, however accurate they might be, may not be accepted by the patient unless it is designed properly to be embedded into the clinical experience. Certainly, triage or some process like that carried on at hospital level needs to be accepted by the public. Otherwise, people will always say, why not? Why are you attending to that patient and not to my patient? And of course, policy decisions, whether at a local or state or federal level, have to be completely informed by social and sociological conventions and decisions. So, what we have found, especially in these times of pandemic, is that these decisions not only have to be efficient and optimal, but they have to be implementable. And they can only be implemented if people accept it. And you need to in order for the correct, quote unquote, correct decision to be made, it is not enough to have a decision that is theoretically or mathematically optimal. It has to be socially optimal in the sense that people have to accept it and carry it out. This is one of the problems, for instance, with mask mandates all around the world. In the US, there are people who don't believe in masks. In India, people who wear their masks on their chins, and they're just not serious about it because they haven't been taught the importance of masks and the importance of masks in arresting this epidemic. So this is something that is coming up all the time in AI now. The explainability of AI, the ethical considerations of AI, and the social acceptance of AI that may be optimal but not accepted. And this is as true in pandemic fighting as in any other part of the social landscape. So that's my add-on to what Devon suggested was the main uses of AI in this sphere. Over to you, CS.
I thank both of you for making that sound so simple to a complete tech novice I call myself, and I'm sure many of our viewers who of course are very very interested but would want us to be talking in very very simple equilateral terms. And I really thank both of you, for that commendable answer to this question. We now move on to the next question, which is what are few other epidemiological models and forecast used by the Asia Pacific region in particular? And I request, Dr. Guha again to take that first.
Thank you, CS. I'll start by saying that epidemiology is not a recent invention. It has been around for a while, and epidemiologists have been constructing models that track or attempt to model the dynamics of the spread of infectious diseases for a long time now. Goes back to the early 20th century. And they have many very fancy models, starting with the very simple SAR model and going on to more complicated models. Some of these models are very elaborate simulations of the actual pattern of movement by populations around the globe, the density of population, their patterns of movement, and the current patterns of infections, and trying to forecast the progress of the disease, the infection, given a certain starting point. And these models are typically what are called stochastic differential equations. That is to say, they have a random component, and they also are a dynamic process in time. So they evolve over time, and the evolution is partly random. And these models are fairly well understood, and they are modeled using large scale computational methods quite effectively. What the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, has taught us about the what remains to be done in epidemiology is that these these models are what are called direct models. They directly process or model the dynamics, but they're not inverse models in the sense that they don't go from the data to the model. They're they don't confront the data as successfully as they define the process. What does that mean? That means that the statistical part, where you actually gather data about the progress of the disease and fit that into the model, is not as well developed as the other part. Now, what we know for sure is that this data is incomplete and in many cases inaccurate, and that is not a question of somebody trying to hide the data necessarily. It is intrinsic in the nature of the process that it's a disease that's most of the time asymptomatic, so a lot of the infections will not be detected. There are a lot of patients who may not visit medical professional, and therefore they will not be part of the hospital record. There may even be fatalities that are missed, either because the system of registration is not complete. So this data is always in error. And what we need are models that can take into account the fact that the data that we collect is not very high precision. And some models have been developed recently. One of them that has been quite well known in India is the Sutra model, SUTRA, developed at IIT Kanpur, surprisingly not by an epidemiologist, but a mathematician. And this data actually uh, tries to estimate the level of error in the data and update itself every day. Another model that was proposed by a friend of mine who was from Stanford, again, not an epidemiologist, but a physicist, uh, takes a very similar approach. Uh, and these are models that have taught us that however fancy your number crunching and your models might be, ultimately, if you don't have the right data, then it's all gigo, garbage in, garbage out. And therefore, we need to uh, strengthen our data collection apparatus and our data recording apparatus all around the world, not just in India or Asia, but everywhere, but especially in India and Asia, because some of the infirmities here are cause of large scale data errors. And this has been a trend throughout history. The first death registration process in India, for instance, started in the 1860s as a response to the cholera epidemic of the 1860s. In the flu epidemic of 1918, several methods were developed of correcting fatality counts without census data. And this time around we have the app-based tracking and recording and all those innovations. So we are constantly making innovations and improving things, but there is really a long way to go. And these epidemiology models, while they are quite elaborate on the probability stochastic modeling side, they're not as good on the statistical side, and that remains to be fixed. But they are getting fixed, and now we are doing much better. For instance, the current second wave in India, it is starting to come down, and this was in fact predicted by epidemiologists as far back as in March, that the peak will most likely be in mid-May, and the the severity of the wave probably will start to go down towards the end of May, and that is exactly what happened. So they were right on the money there. So with that, I'll stop and I'll hand back to CS.
Thank you so much for sharing those wonderful insights, Dr. Guha. I would now request Dr. Dasgupta to share his views in addition to what we heard from Dr. Guha.
Yeah, but as Dr. Guha said, is that uh, there is one side which is doing the modeling, and there is another side looking at the data and then coming out with a solution. So in India, I know the IITs are doing a couple of work in this space. But one of the interesting thing that is happening is when you do the modeling, uh, in the epidemic modeling, you typically use compartmentalized model using Markov chains generally, and there are other models also. So you model the maths, start working on the maths using your Markov chains, and then when you get that exact data, you start looking at time series data. So in the time series, then the one that is normally used, there are other methods like recurrent neural networks, then long short-term memory. So these couple of methods are there by which these are all probabilistic methods, and you can look at modeling based on the data that we have got. This is for the containment and the management of the epidemic. And there, as of right now, I think some European studies were done in the United States. The US government, there is a one Dr. Paul, who is a good friend of mine, and he uses the ARIMA model extensively, at least in the United States, and for the prediction of how much of viral, how much the model would be impacted by bringing in people from outside of the country. So because US is still open, if you know, so and there is always a chance of getting fresh layers of infections in the country. So that is what he was working on, and so they were using a model called flower pollination method. So like a bee is pollinating the different flowers and how it happens. So a couple of very interesting models that are happening, but essentially the wisdom here is that there is a model is one part, and then data is another part. So from model to data and from the data to model, this is the journey and the back and forth that is happening, and different methods are used on both this pie. So that's my take.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Dasgupta, for those wonderful insights. We now move to a very, very interesting question because a lot of our viewers, I'm sure, whether they are employed by someone or they employ themselves via an entrepreneurial venture, but the business side, we've seen, the first two questions, we've of course seen the data side to the current crisis. And I would exclusively have our alums both working at very foremost companies that are at the hotbed of trying to find ways for other businesses to thrive in these difficult times. The question that comes and stares us in the face right now, friends, is what are the challenges currently faced by data scientists? Is data analytics pivotal in reviving businesses in the APAC today? And I can see that both Devan and Yogesh are smiling at the prospect that question throws open in front of both of them. So, Yogesh, I would want you to share your insights, and then we'll follow it up with Devan putting on his points.
Sure, I'll do a test. Am I audible?
Absolutely, good to go.
Yes, you are.
So challenges faced by data scientists. if any aspiring data scientist or somebody who claims to be a data scientist can just go to YouTube and see what it takes to be a data scientist. And most of the parties who are claimant to that, they say that you don't need to understand mathematics. You don't need to understand binomial equations. You don't need to understand, what a differential or an advanced integration technique is, right? Or a polynomial equations, correlations. I think mathematics is very, very embedded into the data science. Now, most of these WYSIWYG or what you see is what you get kind of tools. They embed mathematics as an abstraction layer. So thereby you are, limited to drag drop, providing the parameter estimate. So this is one challenge that a data scientist faces, is where to start from. The other is the data itself, right? At times, the data on which they are working, it presents lots of challenges. There are gaps in the data, there are overlaps in the data. The comprehensibility of the data is missing. Perhaps there is cross correlation of the data that requires with structured and unstructured data. All of these things, a data scientist is really, on a pedestal to ensure that he just gets into model building. It's not about model building. It's not about creating those, jazzy neural net or a, random forest kind of a models. It's about how the model predictive power is going to be empowered. That is what the data scientist should be focusing on. And for that, data engineering becomes a key tenet, right? The third quality is the business hypothesis. The users or the data scientists themselves can come with a business hypothesis of tackling a problem, like both the sirs said, right? It could be related to the pandemic or it could be related to any other business. Do I have the understanding or the domain to appreciate that particular problem, leave alone data, right? So that appreciation or interpreting or inferring the problem is extremely core to doing the first step of data modeling. And finally, the technical skills. Should I be using R, Python, Lua, K9, H2? There are so many technologies, so many languages and tools, overwhelming at times, right? So I think we have to go inside out rather than outside in over here. And finally is a communication, right? After all the model outputs have come, it's not everybody, any business user's cup of tea to comprehend that particular model output. If you just cannot say this is my discriminatory power of the model, that needs to be translated into simple English for them to understand the impact. Similarly with the ROC, lift ROC is very overwhelming when somebody looks at the curve, right? They need to understand in simple English. I think all of these are rare qualities that are expected in one data scientist. Right, so this is how I would like to take it. The part two is it pivotal? Yes. When we look at APAC, when we look over our shoulders, we are looking at a very, very high, population density sub-region. And there is need for contactless, delivery also over here. Now, if you look at, few of the industries like hospitality, entertainment, they are being struck by the headwinds. But then there are few industries, and that's where the supply chain and logistics is very, very essential. Now we see everything, including food and grocery, being delivered into our homes, right? So that is the kind of convenience that we are talking about. But it's not easy without, good advanced analytics systems being built in, so that the entire supply chain does not have pressure points and it becomes autonomous. When you look at few other industries like banking, they have been reeling under pressures because most of the money or borrowers who have taken money, they are not able to repay it, right? So quickly they need to pivot towards, so credit risk because of this is very, very high. They need to pivot towards how do I, improvise my lending platform? Can I move from an asset-based lending to an cash flow-based lending? Now, all of these are easier said than done. And for that, again, data science becomes very, very core. So this is how I'd like to sum up the questions. I don't know. Yeah. Over.
Thank you. Thank you for those insights. Yogesh, Devan, over to you.
Thanks, CS. Well, again, I strongly believe that data plays an integral role in reviving business, not just in APAC, but globally. As Prof. Guha said, it's a connected world now, and COVID's just shown us how connected it is. Having said that, I believe, data scientists, whenever you talk to them, they would say they need data. That was their biggest challenge. But in this situation, I think what we see is access to data has become much more democratized. People all over the world have realized that unless there is a seamless sharing of data, not only medical, but social, economic, demographic data, it is difficult for doctors to treat or governments to form appropriate policies, etc. So yes, access to data has become democratized. However, I would say the challenge right now has been become the quality of data. And this is something that both Prof. Dasgupta and Guha have touched on, the large error quality, etc. And we cannot, rule out noise, intentional or otherwise, that's present in data that's, set out by different countries. However, what I would like to emphasize on is the positives. Technologies like cloud, mobile, and most importantly, the willingness of people to share data for a common cause has certainly reduced the initial challenges that most data scientists complain about. Let's come back to the APAC region itself. In APAC, we face some specific challenges being in APAC. One is population density, and even from a biological or a chemist's point of view, if I analyze it, the population itself is prone to certain kinds of disease, comorbidities like heart failure, hypertension, diabetes, which cause more fatalities or more complications when one has COVID. So going back to what Prof. Guha said, data scientists tend to go for optimal solutions, but is it a socially acceptable one? Is it something socially implementable one? That is very important, and it's important for us to stop and ask the so what question. We have data that has enabled us to make great diagnostic solutions, but in Asia, largely we have limited capacity for testing and contact tracing as well, not to talk about compliance of people. So how do we work on isolating infectious cases? That's a challenge. How do we look at high burden of co-infections or poor healthcare systems that cannot provide adequate treatment or timely treatment, even if you have the treatments at the right time, at the right place for all affected individuals? And finally, we have to acknowledge that economies, not all of them are equal. There's some strong and many weak, and they cannot sustain prolonged lockdowns without dire economic consequences. So I'm a particularly big fan and a firm believer that amongst the three that I talked about, diagnostics, therapeutics, and prophylactics, vaccines, I think diagnostics have the most impact and potential of allowing people to open up economies and hopefully go for the post COVID normal business as usual. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Yogesh and Devan. And of course, the next question that comes us is equally interesting. How do data management, visualization, and machine learning, I will repeat that because these are three very heavy terms of today's times. How do data management, visualization, and machine learning help in enabling real-time data analysis? Is it true that data analytics is only affordable by big companies with huge budgets? And of course, I think that's one common perception of the man on the street, of any other business that doesn't qualify itself as a big business that people have on their minds. So this is obviously something where we need to throw the real light so that people can benefit rather than dwindle on whether it's for me or not sort of a scenario. And on that, I would request Devan, followed by Yogesh, to throw some insights.
Thank you, CS. I will, in some sense, take it together, even though data management, visualization, and machine learning are very distinct. But what I would first like to start off with is a vehement no that it is not just for big companies with huge budgets. Today, with so much content, as well as the hope and hype and promise surrounding data science and the acknowledgement at a very fundamental level, I'm proud to also belong to SPGen, that's conducting the #1 data analytics course in India today, that there is a fundamental need to make people data literate. And I would see that in the near future, every person is a data scientist at some level and become a citizen data scientist to take decisions. And then moving forward, I would say that let's talk about some interesting use cases that touch on data management, visualization, machine learning. So in my own stream of work, I work a lot with healthcare startups, particularly in Asia. I raise funds for them and also they go to markets. So one that comes, or two that come to my mind specifically, one is called Cure.ai. It's from IIT Bombay, and it's spread in India as well as the US now. And now with just you can take the picture of your chest X-ray, send it to Cure, and they, using their cloud platform and machine learning, can tell you whether you have COVID related pneumonia, to what extent. It can give you the score for your X-ray or for your CT. Now that is called democratizing access. You might be able to go to a radiological lab and acquire the data, but you might struggle to get an appointment for a radiologist or a pulmonologist to read it. But now, with the help of these companies, you can access such powerful tools that, at least these are all assistive. They could help doctors speed up their work. The other one that comes to my mind is Tricog, which again, huge amounts of data management of ECG. They collected ECG data and used visualization and machine learning to predict whether someone's having a blood clot, a heart attack, other problems with the heart. And that can be done remotely. You can be sitting in some remote corner, some village, not just in India, but anywhere. But in all likelihood, you would find that ECG is going to be, if the next time somebody, I hope not, but any one of you gets a ECG read, it is likely to be done by Tricog, and it is going to be sitting somewhere in Jayanagar in Bangalore. And you might be in somewhere in a remote place in Himachal or Gujarat or elsewhere. So that's the power of data in bringing together data management, visualization, and machine learning, and enabling real time or close to real time data analytics and decision making. And as again, I recircle to the fact that it's not just for big companies. It's with huge budgets. It's a necessity for everyone now.
Yeah, good. Devan, I would like to add upon, real time. When I look at the real time problems, right? It's not just about real time data consumption. It's about even real time data generation. Say, for example, during the wake of Corona, we saw Remdesivir and Tosil and all of these hoardings started happening, right? We need to devise a mechanism on a real time, because the supply is quite constant. At least the supply is measured. The demand is not. So where all are the pressure points being created? Flip over to an example like a credit card or even ATM, right? The data is getting generated on real time, right? And we are talking about, lakhs, if not crores of transactions per day. It's humanly impossible for somebody, to man a team of like 20 people, 24/7 tracking, what are the anomalies in those transactions. And now we are talking about deep neural nets, even aiding to that. It's no longer limited to just, anomalies on data. It kind of depicts in a much more visual way. So the real time is now reducing from like, close to a month, some 10 years back, to almost real time now. Being able to manage this kind of a high velocity data, you need hyperscalers, right? It could be cloud or non-cloud. IBM has cloud, Azure, Microsoft, all of these people. We are still trying to toy around with the sovereignty norms over here in the South Asia region, because the governments are not so open to have the personally identifiable information being hosted on cloud. But having said that, the right data, if it is provided on hyperscalers on cloud, or powerful data warehouses on prem, then I think all of these starts making sense. Visualization and machine learning is the last step, wherein once all of this data is available, it's well managed, that's where I start kind of consuming this model at a very, very rapid pace. And is it true that it's only for the biggies? I would say partly yes. That's where I draw an exception, because they have an appetite to absorb failure. They have got deep pockets to absorb failures. But somebody who is very, very new, for him, the chances of failure are very less, because there's a limited investment that we are talking about. And what are the kind of things that we look at, right? So first is the data is democratized. Devan spoke about that. The APIs are now more openly available, right? The technologies are for everybody to lap up. The trainings are free. But the thing is, the trainings have to be questioned whether they are good enough or not. So that is a qualifier that I would like to add. What is the data that I need? Even if I'm picking up one small, fraud analytics use case, what is the data that I need? For that data, and to manifest that kind of a problem, now I have to fill out what is the kind of processing, pre-processing, engineering, feature engineering, data engineering that I need to do. What all model approaches? Is it just one model approach? Because if I've only learned logistic regression, I'll only do logistic regression. Do I know how do I take the classification, whether or not I should be using a decision tree or a random forest or maybe a extreme gradient boosting? They're all, kind of help me or aids me in doing a decision, right? But picking up of the right models, now the technologies are available to do the ensemble and provide the champion model, right? So we need to look at that, work backwards from what the business outcome would be, and finally have all the options explored, and then take it to the resourcing, wherein now I know that these are the technologies. I have weighed on 3 or 4 technologies. This is the one technology that I would like to adopt for my organization, and for this I need to go out and hunt for the right resource, or you can cultivate the resource for training. So this is how I think the nimble footed who are low on funding kind of companies can go about carving out a very, very successful unicorn data science journey. Over.
Thank you so much, both of you. Uh, the next, and this is of course our last question. We have to be mindful of the time we have, the 20 minutes to go. So the last question that I have is, and again, last not the least, of course, as they say, what are some of the major possible pitfalls of data analysis one should be mindful of, especially in predictive analysis? And I would request Yogesh to throw some insights here.
Yeah, I started with answering the first question. So one is, anybody who is championing has to have a big picture of things, right? It cannot be just limited to one step of the entire crisp DM life cycle. Two is, if we are doing it for a customer, right, we need to have somebody who is a accountable and owner person in the customer organization. Could be a chief data scientist or a data officer, because without that accountability, I think then we are, getting into a wild goose chase, right? Now coming over to the treatment of data, and we have seen, right, there are date of births that are kind of missing. There is a maturity for a loan, the maturity date is missing. We see all of these ages missing, right? So then we do something called as a mean value imputation, right? So all of these are small subtle techniques. We try to ensure that the normal distribution of the entire data set is not compromised, because without that you'll either end up getting a overfit or an underfit model, because then you try to create a model to fit a data, which is not right. It is not a generalized model. So you have to get to a generalized model so that it could be ultimately be used by the user. Understand the core linearities, reduce the data noise, use a PCA, component analysis, or a variable inflation factoring, and try to get rid of all the noise and focus on the data that gives you a good representation of the overall spectrum of data. And that's where you build the right approach for a model and take it forward. If you don't do that, then it leads to problems like curse of dimensionality, which by the way is my favorite topic. I can speak for hours together. And also choosing the right model. The last is the deployment. I have seen for so many customers or the prospects that we deal with, at times it never sees the lights of the day. It just gets limited to the research labs. That is something because people don't know how to deploy it. Even if they have to deploy, the deployment itself takes like 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 8 weeks, and finally it gets fizzed out because there's no consumption of that. I think after doing so much of work, if you are left at the last stage, it's better that it sees the light of the day. So that is very important from a business hypothesis validation perspective. Over.
Thank you so much, Yogesh. I would also request Dr. Guha to share some insights here on this question.
Thank you, CS. Yogesh has already touched upon many of the technical issues, like question of fitting, question of model selection. Let me step back a little and talk about what I might call a meta error. Um, Prescriptive analytics, or predictive analysis, um, often is focused, and especially by people who know the technology well, on a specific problem. And we need to often take a step back and focus on what it is that we're doing for, and how it is going to be used. The question often in a real life setting is to solve a business problem or to aid a business decision. Now, it is very easy to get carried away into solving an elegant problem and solve the problem, like the famous example of searching under a street lamp because there is more light there, and solve a problem that is a nice, elegant technical problem, but doesn't actually address the business issue. So this is what, for instance, we are hoping to focus on in our courses, is that obviously we need the technical models, we need the technical knowledge, but let us not forget that we are trying to solve a business problem, that we are trying to solve, make better business decisions. And often, if you formulate the business problem clearly enough, then that is more important than solving with very high precision some kind of a technical problem. And eventually you bring it back to your management and they say, well, that doesn't really help us. That's not what we started out with. And that's, fine, you have solved, you have used, 100 billion parameter, transformer model, and, you have 99.99% accuracy. But this is not even what we want. So this meta error is actually quite common in many circles. That, and part of the reason is that there are a lot of people who are very good at technical, AI or machine learning, and even data science, but they don't understand the business issues as well. And the business guys, they don't know enough the technology to clearly formulate the problem. So what we need is kind of a bridge, people who understand both parts of the problem, the business issues and the technical issues. And this is, I think, the biggest uh, pitfall in applying data science to real life. That what technical problems correspond to what business problems, and to understand the business problem well enough to formulate the technical problem clearly. And I would say that this, once people understand this, the quality of our AI models and their deployability, as Yogesh very correctly pointed out, that many of these are fancy models that maybe published in academic magazines and journals, but are carrying are gathering dust in some kind of a research lab and never actually getting implemented. And this is something that I think that all data scientists must pay a lot more attention to. Thanks. That will be all for me.
Thank you so much. A wonderful panel. And of course, without losing any time, we still have about 13, 14 minutes to go in this live session. We would like to take as many audience questions, and a lot of audience, our attendees have posted some interesting questions. The first one that I see in front of me is by Mr. Anil Bantupadhyay, who's a professor in India. And I think part of this we've already discussed, so maybe we can add something we may have missed, or you would want to add, one of you. How to combat the challenges posed by the present pandemic situation to business entities and ensure growth. So I think, if one or two points anyone wants to add here from the panel on ensuring growth at a time like this.
So I can take it actually.
Sure. Go ahead, Yogesh, please.
See, the pandemic is kind of, it applies brakes to our acceleration. That's how I would treat it, right? And that is where, we need to maneuver for alternate paths. How do we do that, right? Quite a few businesses have turned digital. So digital transformation, and as much cliched as it may sound, it is, leading the curve. Everything, I've seen dunzos of the world, delivering parcels in like 50 rupees. You don't have to go anywhere. I think this is something that is very important. And the other thing from a pandemic perspective is to ensure that we stay safe. And for that, the mechanisms are brought in, like like Professor said, all the way from masking it up to the entire life cycle of COVID. Am I showing symptoms? Am I able to use some IoT sensors to have this particular thing relate to a particular database, wherein somebody is preemptively reaching out to me, oh man, you have to stay aside because now you are in a risk zone, rather than having to wait for the RT-PCRs and the antigen tests. And then over to the medication, wherein whether it's remdesivir or just antiviral, any other antiviral, the demand and supply logistics has been really crippling off late, because sudden because of the sudden spike and spurt, the supply could not reach the last mile. I think this is a big pressure point, I would say, for India, and that now has to be streamlined. Thankfully, because the demand has reduced, because COVID-2 wave is on a decline. But if we have to brace ourselves up for a next wave, then I think the supply chain at distribution is very, very important, and that is something that could be taken care of. And third, from a growth perspective for any other business, I think times are subsiding, and more now the investors are coming and trying to lap up new businesses, right? So even that thing, I'm seeing the sun rising over there. It's not all gloomy at the end of the day, and there is light at the end of the tunnel. This is how I'd like to sum it up.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Yogesh. We have a question from one of our alumni, actually, and I can recognize him, Prashant Verma, who works with Aramex in Dubai. I want to know about predictive analytics. What can we expect in future about data predicting scenarios for business planning? And I know we've talked about it briefly during the questions, but any other key pointers that you would like to, any one of you would like to add in addition?
Because okay, so let me again take a stab at it. Is because we are talking about predicting scenarios, we are clearly differentiating ourselves from an inferential statistics to a predictive to a more recommendation engine kind of a thing. It's as simple as, and it's not only a matter of, okay, this is how the visualization or a pie chart looks like. It's about, if I can talk to my Alexa while tying a shoelace, right, sitting at a in another room, and she gives me exactly what I need. It could be a direction, or it could be even playing the best music album, but that's limited in functionality. Slowly, this is going to take over. It's all about natural language processing and generation and transmission, that is going to simplify the business and eventually revert or relay it back to us in a language which is English, that is best understood by us, right? So this is how I'd like to sum it. But more and more of the recommendation is coming, right? And it's you see, you Google it out. If on a map from A to B, you get multiple options, right? Some options may be really saving on time, but maybe it would be a bumpy road, right? But other options, so these are all about options, and these are the predicted scenarios that we are talking about. I think there's nothing much more to read in it, Prashant. Yeah.
Lovely. The next question, I'm hell bent, but to take it, I'm sorry, but I don't have an option. It's come from no one else but my son, who studies in India in the 12th grade, very passionate to get into data science, and he's asking a question. I would love to see you elaborate on how data science can help in upcoming technological advancements. And again, I think we've spoken about it, but to a 16-year-old passionate about data science, Dr. Guha, would you want to provide any pearls of wisdom?
Okay, I'll take a stab at it. As Yogesh said, um, data science and AI is going to be intrinsic. It will be like an essential part of every technology going forward from now on. Uh, I'm sure everybody has heard the expression AI is the new electricity. And in some ways, AI is more than electricity. Electricity, once it was discovered and harnessed, became a part of every technological advance from there on. Our cars use that, our homes use that, everything uses. Without electricity, we cannot carry on. AI is going to be even more essential if it's possible, because ultimately, what is AI? AI is the computational equivalent of figuring out things and doing things uh, better than we could without computational help. And therefore, any technology that we develop from here on in is going to be have embedded. Part of it is going to be AI itself and data science itself, and also it's going to be embedded. So, for instance, all future automotive technologies are going to be have a lot of embedded computational techniques. All biotech is wedded to various kinds of data technologies, and bioinformatics is a subject in itself and a very important part of biology. Systems biology is a very important part of biology right now. This is true of all sociology, for instance, which used to be more of an art than a science, is quickly turning into computational sociology and AI sociology. The subject of sociology and the subject of multi-agent uh, artificial intelligence are turning out to be the same subject. A lot of creative technologies are going to have embedded AI components and other components. So essentially, what will happen is that AI will become so ubiquitous that we are simply going to stop noticing it unless it fails. Just as we don't really look at our transmission lines and our electrical generators until and unless something fails and we are in darkness because of a cyclone or because of a system failure. Similarly, AI is going to be so deeply embedded into everything that we do and every technology going forward that we simply kind of stop noticing it and take it for granted in the future. That's sort of my take on it. Thanks.
Thanks for the insight, Dr. Guha. The next question we will take, and probably this will be our last question of the day. We have a paucity of time. Is from Komal Parekh, and I would like to pose this to Dr. Dasgupta. We've had him quiet for a while, and that's not the way I like to see him. Uh, Her question clearly is, what kind of jobs would be trending in the market? And let's look at that from a business school as we are perspective too, for the next 10 years, given the current scenario. So Dr. Dasgupta, over to you on this question.
Very interesting question, but nobody knows the answer worthy, and we can make our informed guesses. As of right now, in the job market, particularly in the computer science, data science field, you will see there are two distinct type of jobs. One is of data science, and the second is of data engineering, and then there are layers of that. Okay, but these are the two primary packs. There is also something business analytics, which draws skills from these both these boxes. Now, as of right now, since the data science is being used in many of the companies simply because they want to be more competitive or try to harness growth as we are into different difficult situations. You will see because there is another thing that has happened, which is cloud has become ubiquitous. So every company, I think there was a last NASCOM meeting I was there. About 78% companies in the world uses cloud. Now, whether in form of a private cloud, public cloud, or a hybrid cloud, that's a different matter, but they use cloud. So as cloud is going to become more and more ubiquitous, and you will see that more of these data science algorithms or the experiments, the methods, are going to be part of the cloud offerings, which is going to be in the space of data engineering. So right now, if you look at it, 70% of the jobs are in data science, about 30% in data engineering. My belief, this is going to go gradually in the reverse fashion, which is data engineering is going to become 70% and data science is going to be about 30%. But the skill set required a little different here. For a data science, it is likely you need to have a doctoral degree behind it, whereas there is no such requirement for a data engineering career. So data engineers also get paid about 20-30% more internationally. I'm talking about the US and also in India. It's that they're a little under higher skill set in terms of the demand. So maybe data science could be a good start, but the migration would slowly happen towards data engineering. So either of these two, if you look at it, you are safe from a 10 to 20 years perspective. This is primarily my take, and this is a guess. Yes, Devanathan, you were saying something. You unmute, please.
Yes,
Yes.
Devon, please go ahead and add your points.
Yeah, Komal, interesting question again, and I'm just going to make it a little more general. That coming from a more medical background, there's always, or there was usually, a big controversy that AI is going to replace doctors. But finally, the consensus: doctors who can adopt digital health and AI methods are the ones who will replace doctors who will not adopt these methods. It's not like doctors are going to be replaced. Same way, I think, as we move forward, and given that we just connected on LinkedIn as well, Komal, thanks for adding me. I believe from a very general perspective, knowing something about data analytics, business analytics is going to be the new Word, the new PowerPoint, the new Excel 5 years from now. It is not something that is going to be, it's going to be a necessity more than anything else. A person who's going to be having these things, who's going to be stronger at these things, will obviously be in demand. But I would still lay emphasis on a subject matter expertise that could be very well away from data, can you as a doctor, or can you as an accountant, or can you as a audit specialist be extremely good with the use of data? Can you make or conclude things or find patterns that others cannot find? That is what you would like to see as a differentiator to be trending in the market in the next 5 years. 10 years is, I think, too further away, but I think 5 years from now, I think you would want to look at it as a differentiator, and to see that you add data scientist or data analytics capability on top of some kind of a subject matter expertise that you would have.
Lovely, lovely. Uh, any other pointer to this? I think Dr. Guha has a point to add. Yes, please. Do go ahead, Dr. Guha.
Not to this, but I would like to take a different question. This is
Sure,
a
please.
question asked by Marianne Franzen. And the question is AI ML a male or female responsibility? Can we expect female speakers on this topic today as well? And I would start out by apologizing to Marianne and every other woman in the audience that our panel is so severely gender imbalanced. We are in the process of trying to recruit women faculty in this area. I think we should be able to include more women on our panel in the future. Addi- Additionally, we are also trying very hard, and I think uh, Professor Dasgupta will bear me out in that we are trying to recruit as many talented women as our students in our data science and AI programs as possible. And we have been not successful in making the ratio even, but we have done much better than in the past. So the short answer to this question is, going back to what I said before, is that however optimal and however efficient you may think your thinking is and your decision making is, without embedding it into a social context, it doesn't mean much. So if there are 4 or 5 men talking about AI/ML and what's best for AI/ML and prescribing what is good for you, and there are no women in the panel, then the question naturally arises that is this something that is going to be dictated to women by men? And that is not the way that it is going to be, and that is not the way that it is done best. And we need to include more diversity, more gender diversity, more ethnic diversity, and that improves decision making, as has been proved over and over again by research all over the world. So that is the short answer to the question. A very interesting question raised by Ms. Franson. Thank you.
Thanks for picking on that, Dr. Goa, and of course, very, very pertinent in our times. We are, of course, living in the most, when it says equality of the sexes timing of the world in, our lives. Uh, Thanking you again, all, and I will try to just briefly summarize. I think this panel was fantastically putting through points, and whether there were people deeply involved in data science or data scientists or complete novice. And I take myself, despite being the moderator of this session, as quite a bit of a data science novice. But it was very, much of an eye opener. Uh, and I think what the panel has done is try to put it, each word in very, very simple terms, so that it's applicable and understood by all of our wonderful audience and attendees. Uh, there is one angle I would, of course, want to touch, and I'm coming again from the personal bit of today being my parents' wedding anniversary, and last month they were both in hospital, both COVID positive in India, and luckily they've managed to fight it, and we've been extremely lucky as a family. But I know there's nobody today, whether it's in our panel or our attendees, who has not, known someone in close relatives, friends, a well-wisher who has not been affected by the current pandemic. And while on one side we look at the data science bit and survival and businesses doing well, what remains most important is, of course, the human bond. And the only way to survive this crisis, while data science is key, but I think it's the human bond and humanity. And again, from each country in the world, we have seen enough images of the real humanity evolve over this crisis. People helping each other in times of need, reaching out, whether it's your neighbor or someone on the street. someone at a distance. And I know that some of you yourselves are very personally, engaged in such activities. We, as a business school, of course, for our alums exclusively, have had a platform where anyone who's an active member of our alumni association, and only for the alums working in India who've lost employment, they have a one-time aid of 75,000 rupees, which I won't say is necessarily money to end all necessities in life, but it's help in some order, some form. And there've been every alumni chapter of the school, whether it's in Dubai or in Singapore or in India and elsewhere, has tried their level best to put together hands. And we've also done that within our communities, within our schools and engineering colleges, undergrad college alumni associations. So I would request each of the attendees who are here to please take that as a pledge. And I don't need to mention it, I'm sure all of you will do it anyways, but let's keep that human angle going. I would like Yogesh, of course, to end this, because Yogesh goes through some very, very personal experiences that I think is important and pertinent to be shared. And maybe, Yogesh, I can spare just a minute before we, call it the end of the session. But some of the things, interestingly, you've been doing in Singapore,
Yeah.
the whole thing is not to highlight what you do, but to encourage others to do this and much more, because that's what each one of us needs truly. And that'll only help us, beat this pandemic and leave it far behind. So, Yogesh, over to you.
So, Corona, thank you so much, CS. Corona has changed our lives, compelling us to think in more than one ways now. We are talking about, how things change, in just one blow of wind. And if we don't take cognizance of that, perhaps we are in the same race of, fulfilling our aspirations, which never get fulfilled, right? So there is some subconscious calling that always is there. What after this, right? Every day we ask the question, what after this? So suddenly there's a life-changing event. Okay, there's something that people, on the street, they want of you, right? And it's not just, it's never mostly about money. It never gets over there, but also about providing all the wisdom. See, we are in a business of intellectual capital, right? That intellect, if we are able to pass it down now as part of, over and above my organization that I'm serving very passionately, in free times, in fact, I've got a call starting soon after, wherein we have some 42 students, all extremely bright, girls and boys, all the way from 15 years to 24 years, exceedingly good and meritorious student, but they come from extremely deprived economic background. Now, and if one of their system, there's nothing, right? It's like hand to mouth. If somebody passes away in COVID, God forbid, they are left to lurch, right? Those are the kind of students that we try to take under our umbrella and ensure that they get all the aid. And then there is no either or asking questions. Once we have decided to adopt, we go ahead and adopt. I think that personal touch, we are all coming from a background, we are blessed on many fronts. I think this is something cost to society is a service to God, is what I would say. I think everybody should step forward, march forward, in ensuring that all of us are socially delivering as well to the society.
Thank you so much, Yogesh. On that note, I would like to thank each one of our wonderful attendees who have been extremely patient. And I'm happy if the kind of information we shared helps you in your endeavors, in your business to prosper at a time like this. I cannot end this session without thanking from the bottom of my heart all the wonderful panel speakers, of course, but equally and more importantly, uh, SPJN's social media marketing, and PR teams that have worked extremely hard at a time like this to ideate on a topic like this. And let me mention this to all the attendees, that this is the first of many more Lead Tomorrow sessions, live LinkedIn sessions that SPJN as a leading business school across Asia will be coming up with, that talks about the kind of challenges, problems that really affect us and ways around it. And thanking our marketing team, and once again all our panel speakers. I wish all the wonderful people we've managed to meet a wonderful Saturday evening, and most of them in India and Singapore already are about to be hitting that. Singapore has hit that evening hour. India is about to be. So enjoy your weekends, enjoy your Saturday evening. Stay safe. Keep yourself and your family, as much in a safe zone and with the right precautions in place, irrespective of whether there's a lockdown or restriction in your city or not. COVID is still there and haunting us, and I'm sure with data science and the right sort of action from our side and the right sort of preventions will not, bother us as much as it had managed to maybe last year. So see you all, wonderful people, and looking forward to the next Leave Tomorrow live session here on this platform. See you all. Bye.
Thank you.